Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this in the world. I hope you guys are doing okay. So the main man recently opened up a conversation regarding Tekken 8 being more difficult than Tekken 7. And having listened to the entire video, it's hard to say he's wrong, but I think Tekken 8 is harder for the wrong reasons. I'm going to go over his video and give my thoughts on the situation, and of course you guys are more than welcome to give your thoughts on everything that I'm saying and everything the main man is saying. Just a respectful disagreement on my end.
Tekken 8 is way more easier than 7 because of being way more offensive. Defensive players find Tekken 8 more difficult than Tekken 7, but in general... No, exactly. It's harder to defend. I always find it a little bit amusing when people present the idea you're presenting, that Tekken 7 is harder than Tekken 8 because it's so much harder to attack in Tekken 7. And it's so much easier to defend in Tekken 7 because you can option select so much with a backdash cancel and a magic 4. But what you don't realize, in my opinion, is that it's the complete opposite that is true. The hardest thing to do in Tekken is to defend. It's never been to attack.
Tekken 7 and Tekken 8 are difficult for completely different reasons. It's harder to defend in Tekken 8 because the game is so oppressive and basically holds you in place for a lot of situations. Whereas Tekken 7 doesn't do that and puts more of the reliance on the player's skill rather than oppressive mechanics and constant 50-50 situations. Mentally speaking, it's going to be more taxing to play Tekken 8, and whilst it might be harder to defend, that's only because the game took away abilities from the defensive player and gave way too many to the offensive player, not because the game is harder due to a well thought out and balanced design. A player that is new to Tekken and has only played Tekken 8 will have a much harder time than someone that is going from 7 to 8. The reason is that Tekken 8 does a fair amount of hand holding compared to its predecessors, so in essence, Tekken 7 is the harder game because the better game design requires more from the player and has less reliance on systems doing the heavy lifting for you.
And it's harder than ever to defend in this game because you don't have an options like backdash. You don't have a magic 4 to get you out of trouble very safely. And characters have super overtuned and oppressive attacks. So now, most of the stuff you actually have to duck now. You gotta sidestep, you can throw a power crush. But the hardest thing in Tekken has always been defense.
Yes, it is harder to defend in this game because they lowered general defense and increased overall offense, which is one of the main complaints of the game. Being able to go crazy on your opponent in a game with 100 plus moves per character, plus a system that allows you to force your pressure on your opponent, is obviously going to be harder for the defender. But being offensive is much easier in this game for that reason. A lot of situations don't require you to think in the same manner you would have in Tekken 7 or games before it because character weaknesses have largely been taken out of the game. Tracking is extremely high, as well as homing attacks being extremely powerful as well. Much of the offense really has little drawbacks. They are making concessions for that, and defense is being buffed and sidestepping has gotten better, but we are not at the point that we can say that it has evened out or even gone anywhere close to that. It's a poor balancing act that Tekken games before it managed much better.
Oh, it's so easy to attack in Tekken 8. That makes it easier. How does it make it easier for you? You're saying this game is easier because it's so easy to attack. But you're not playing alone, are you? Right? You're playing against your opponent, and he also has an easier time attacking.
This is a weird take considering the idea behind this game was to make players feel like they have a fighting chance against much more seasoned veterans. The attacking is objectively easier in this game. Combos are much more accessible now at most levels, and Heat has lowered execution ceilings for characters like Kazuya, for example, who no longer needs the frame perfect input to do his electric wing godfist because the game just does it for you. The same goes for someone like Feng Wei, who gains access to 3+4, which forces the opponent into a crouch state. This puts him in a situation where he is completely at Feng Wei's mercy, and that is both on block and on hit. The idea that offense is not easy in this game is a weird one to make since it's baked into the design philosophy, and we've seen a lot of new players try their hands at older Tekken games and feel quite stuck. Execution does play into this as well, and it's undeniable that the execution in Tekken 8 is easier across the board.
It's the person with the best defense that wins in the end. And it's never been harder to defend, in my opinion, than it is in this game. Because you get so locked down.
Good defense will still win you fights in this game, but it's also extremely lopsided. With the addition of chip damage, it makes it even easier for the attacker to whittle your life down without actually breaking your offense. You're taking recoverable damage in large portions for defending correctly, so of course it's easier to be offensive. Again, they baked it into the system and it's observable at all levels of play. How many times have we seen the bears chipping away at your health? Now, it is also true that chip damage has recently been nerfed and the shenanigans of previous patches are not as prevalent anymore and will seemingly continue to get nerfed, but the very fact that they are nerfing all of these things is an indication that offense was just far too easy to get off. Of course, this also makes the argument true that it's harder to defend in this game, but that's not because of smart design. It's actually the opposite, so I guess he's not wrong, but it's not exactly a good argument for the game. Essentially, yeah, you're gonna have a much harder time defending in this game, and telling someone that as a blanket statement does make Tekken 8 sound like the harder game, but you do need to also explain that the reason for that is they neutered the other side of the game. Basically, poor design and poor balance.
If this was a casino 50-50 game, wouldn't that mean that a bunch of randoms would win the big tournaments? If it's random? If this was literally a slot machine, wouldn't a bunch of randoms win the big tournaments? And then what did I see? Joka, the person in EU, has the best defense in EU. He was the first one to clear God of Destruction. Was that a coincidence? Ni won EVO Japan with a masterclass in defensive gameplay.
This is again quite dismissive to the actual problems of Tekken 8, and in my opinion, an odd take to have. It's true that the same top players are winning in this game, and Ni did put on a spectacle with his Brian most recently, but Ni has also been on record complaining about the very same things that we are. Does that mean he can't overcome it? No, of course not. If Ni can overcome it, does it mean it's no longer a problem? No, of course not. Winning a tournament does not absolve the game of its shortcomings, and Ni is smart enough to know that. A more relatable example for those of us that are good at Tekken but not masters like Ni is myself and my brother. We have both been playing Tekken since we were small, but I've always been invested in the series more than he has. With the release of Tekken 8, my brother saw it as a good opportunity to jump back into this series now that things have been made easier for newcomers. And what do you think the results of him and me playing were after just a few days? I absolutely destroyed him. It wasn't even a challenge. So we gave it a few months. Do you think the gap closed? Not really. I still won 10-0. The results did not change from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, and the reason for that is Tekken 8 has enough legacy inclusions within its infrastructure and general mechanics to still keep newcomers at bay, whilst also removing enough legacy from the game to annoy veteran players. Essentially, the game actually doesn't do much in the end for newcomers because it is still Tekken, and all it does for veteran players is make the actual playing experience more frustrating. Thus, the newcomers will leave anyway because they can't win, and the veterans might leave as well because although they can win, they're unhappy with the design choices and don't particularly want to feel frustrated whilst they're playing the game. They know enough to circumnavigate the bumpy terrain that Tekken 8 presents them, but they also know enough to know when something isn't right.
There's so many dumb things in this game right now, but if you have the defensive competence of Ni, you can deal with it. Ni showed during that tournament that a lot of these counters on these dumb moves, it's a skill issue. In Tekken 7, where it was pretty easy to defend, not super easy, but it was certainly easier. Magic 4, backdash away, especially with Zafin and Kuni and Alisa, they can back away from anything. They feel pressured, reset, back away.
If it was easier to defend, why did so many players absolutely suck at it, and why did they nerf it so much? I think MainMan is misrepresenting what is required for good defense in Tekken games purposefully here. While it's true that it's harder to defend in Tekken 8, that's only because offense is through the roof. The skill required to learn Korean backdashing and knowing when to bob and weave was largely removed in Tekken 8. It might look easier in Tekken 7 because the game is more defensive by nature, but to acquire that level of defense was something few were able to do. For the most part, people were in your face and pushed buttons on Tekken 7, and it was only when you got to the higher levels of play that you realize that someone that's invested in the defense and understands when to move can make your button mashing absolutely obsolete. You take a Tekken 8 newbie and put them in 7 and ask them to approach the game in the manner that they do in Tekken 8 and watch them crumble. Not only will they not be able to defend against anything properly, they'll likely lack the skills to generate an effective offensive style to break the much more nuanced defensive style of Tekken 7. If you then take that Tekken 7 player, I think they'll be perfectly fine in Tekken 8, and I think they will adapt much quicker.
It turns out that in Tekken 8, if you don't have good defense in this game, you can't play the game. You just get obliterated. I think Tekken 8 is the hardest Tekken game ever for intermediate players. Because intermediate players don't have conventional Tekken defense or strong conventional Tekken defense. And if you don't have that in this game, you are obliterated. Because it's so hard to get out of trouble in this game.
That's true, it is hard to get out of trouble in this game, but that is a major red flag because the trouble you're being put in is due to hand-holding systems. It's not because the game demands more from your skill, because it gave too much to not needing higher levels of skill to force your will on someone. If you remove a lot of BS tracking from this game, and the insane properties homing moves have, you're going to suddenly see a lot of people crumble. Is that because they made the game easier? No, it's the opposite actually. It would be making the game harder and demanding more from the player instead of brain dead offense. This happens at a high level as well, and we have witnessed multiple players speak out on this and show frustration in tournaments because of it. On Spag's Heat Speak, we have seen players over and over again express their disdain for this very reason. Top players like Kokoma and even Joker have said these same things. The very same player that MainMan is referencing in this video, these players have spoken out about these issues.
That statement you made, for me it's the opposite. I would just do a 180 on your statement. This game is super fucking difficult because defending is so difficult. But it can be done. It can be done. It's just that you gotta be a 10 out of 10 player.
Yeah, but you don't have to be a 10-10 player to push your offense on someone, and that's the problem. That is why people are reluctant to say 8 is harder than any of the others that came before it. Yes, when you're holding back, but that's because it's a no when you're holding forward and pressing buttons. It's a weird situation, I don't think it's exploring it fairly.
Players tend to forget the true skill gap between pro players and good Tekken players. Yeah, but dude, even among the pro players, you know, the difference between someone like Anakin and Arslan or Anakin and Knee is still huge. Even among the pro players, you see gigantic skill gaps. I felt it when I played against Joka. Like, he displayed defense where I was like, oh shit, you can actually negate this mix-up. You can option select that. You know, those guys just show you defense where you suddenly you understand that, like, oh god, as dumb as this game is, a lot of the stuff can be dealt with if you are just God mode.
Again, you don't have to be God mode to put a majority of even high level players in bullshit situations. I'm not saying I can, but what happens when you have two God mode level players going up against each other? Well, we've seen that time and time again, and they can also be put in situations where they're forced to eat a ton of chip damage and eventually be opened up and slaughtered. It's a roll of the dice at that. Who's going to get their offense off first? You can continuously move the goalpost and make out like this isn't a thing by talking about players of different skill levels, but once you see people of similar or same skill, the same situations keep on occurring. This is also why 4-time EVO World Champion Knee and countless other top players have spoken out about the poor design philosophy behind Tekken 8, and it's why the Tekken team have been implementing so many changes to the game. That is undeniable.
How many pros said Feng Wei's new back 4 mix-up or back 4 tornado was bullshit? What does Knee do? He blocks a 12 frame attack, instantly steps jet upper. Are you and I gonna do that? No. But we gotta recognize that we're not good enough.
It's true that Knee exposed that move to not be the monster that we thought it was. That also comes with a host of issues considering back 4 was buffed in more ways than one, and in that moment Knee got the read and guessed right, but that one example does not negate what you're able to do across the board with most of the cast. If it did, he wouldn't be complaining about the game either, and they certainly wouldn't be making so many changes to characters.
You can always blame the game and say, oh, 50-50 casino, but in the end you don't know how to defend. Yeah, exactly. If you watched EVO Japan, how much mindless spam did you see? I never saw mindless spam. People were actually super cautious about pressing most of the time. Ulsan played very aggressive, but also, of course, had impeccable defense. Have you seen Ulsan's backdash? Ulsan's movement? I'm just like, how does he do that?
Okay, well, I guess there's no issues with the game, and top players have essentially been complaining for absolutely no reason. I'm not exactly sure why he's being so dismissive of these issues, but we definitely saw moments where the offense was so overwhelming that people had to stay in place. To be fair, this was some of the best Tekken we have seen, But once again, the changes are coming in for a reason, and the team have promised to address a lot of the homing, being plus, and tracking issues of the game. These are issues that have been put forward by players that are much more knowledgeable about the game than myself and MainMan.
In other words, this game is only created for talented few, and unless you're super talented, there's no point playing it. Rather play something you're more talented for. Quick draw, you're saying with other words what I was trying to explain there when someone said that this game is easy. I said, no, it's probably the opposite. This game is unbelievably difficult. Learning defense in this game is really difficult, and it always has been. You use Tekken 7 as an example, you know. In Tekken 7, I mean, you know how to string attacks together and create flowcharts and doing a 50-50 mix-up, how to do a throw. Most people can learn that really quickly. But how do you defend against 40 characters throwing stuff at you? How do you duck mid-high strings? How do you backdash properly? How do you punish in general? How are side steps used? When do I do a step like this? When do I sidewalk? What side should I go against your particular character? What's up with parries? Are those good? Sabakis. How do I throw break? How do I break 1-2, 1+2 throws? How do I do a low parry?
That's 100% true. Defense has been and will always be the hardest thing to learn in Tekken, and that is true for Tekken 8. The only issue here is, once again, it's only been made harder because of all of the issues that are being addressed with poor balance in the offense, and by poor balance I mean that it's too heavily skewed towards it. The argument from MainMan is essentially making Tekken 8 sound like it's harder because it was designed with pro players in mind, but it's actually the opposite. It was designed with spectators and new players in mind, which has created a frustrating playing experience for everyone involved. As previously mentioned, there's too much legacy and too much of old Tekken to really stop veteran players from dominating new players, but there's not enough legacy and enough old Tekken to not make old players very frustrated with the game.
Learning defense is the PhD in Tekken. Learning offense is a 7-week course internship at your local fucking grocery store. Defense is the PhD of Tekken. And that's why I said it's never been harder to achieve that PhD than it is in Tekken 8. So yeah, that's all I was trying to say. Yeah, this game is unbelievably fucking difficult. If you're an intermediate player, unless you have a really good mental and you can relax, you're gonna go insane. Because you're gonna be so overwhelmed. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
And that's all well and true, but knowing that it's because the game is in need of proper balance, it would be good to mention. Like I previously mentioned, it sounds like he's making the argument that this was designed to be more hardcore, but that's obviously not the case. It's just more frustrating, so you will go insane, that much is true, but not because you're necessarily bad at the game, it's because it's still got some serious growing pains. Luckily, the Tekken team understands this and are learning from their mistakes. It may become less frustrating because the offense is going to take a hit or the defense is going to be buffed, but it would be inaccurate to say that this is going to make the game easier, because you're basically telling players that the training wheels are now off on the offensive side of things, and now true player expression can be explored when the defensive players really get to show off what they're made of. Now, like I said, this was just a respectful disagreement. I really don't agree with MainMan's assessments of Tekken 8 and the way he's putting them across. It's not that he is completely wrong, but I feel like this is a more nuanced discussion, and that older Tekken games are harder for completely separate reasons. And I think the only reason that this game would be considered harder by some people is because of the frustrating design of it. But once again, that is why there are so many changes coming in, and justifiably so. And I'm pretty sure he's not going to be someone that is going to be mad at the changes being made. And when the changes come in, I'm sure it won't make Tekken easier. It will just make it less frustrating. Those two things are not the same thing, although obviously there can be crossover from time to time. So you guys let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with MainMan? Or do you have your own spin on the whole situation? I'll catch you guys very soon. Take care and peace.